My name's Kristen. Thanks for joining another session of Cloudinary Cafe. This week's session will be talking about how we can understand UGC, user-generated content efficiency through using Cloudinary generative AI features. I'm a technical customer success manager here. So why has Cloudinary invested in AI and in generative AI? Really, the core crux of this issue is managing the amount of visual assets over time. That need increases. However, being able to keep up with that and make sure that we're delivering these assets to every channel that is necessary and getting the assets in all the shapes and the sizes, qualities, formats, etc., really doing that on a forever manual basis is humanly impossible. And so that's where Cloudinary has started utilizing AI. Intelligence has been built into our tools since really the beginning, right? Some of you may be familiar with things like what you're seeing on the right of I want to crop an image, put it on a phone or a video in this case, and make sure that the most interesting part of that is always going to be kept in the scene. So that's what you're seeing here with the transformation that we call gravity. On the left, you can see different things like us using AI to automatically tag assets upon upload, understanding what is in the actual asset so that later that can be searched upon, found, and utilized. And so really, Cloudinary has continued to evolve our AI technology, moving into generative AI features that really quick, just want to go ahead and hop into a generative AI playground. I will be showing a couple things from here throughout the presentation. But really, this is an awesome place to come in and start exploring and understanding a few of our different generative AI capabilities. You can move into any of these different features and play around with what's happening with them. Something I'm not really diving into much today, however, could be useful for user-generated content is going to be our image captioning. For example, we can see that there's a man sitting, thinking about life, pondering things, and we have a short, brief description. If you want within these examples, you can go ahead and upload your own. Of course, chose some cute kittens for my own example here. We're going to process that image, analyze it, understand what's happening. And not only do we get a caption, but it knows that the kittens are adorable. Yeah, definitely an option for you to go ahead and head to the playground, understand with your own assets and your own requirements what could be interesting to maybe dive deeper into more of a POC or do some further testing on your end within your actual environment and Cloudinary environment and instance. So heading back into the presentation, just a little bit more of the backstory of why we're talking about UGC specifically today and why we're pairing that with options of generative AI. What we've found is that when we have assets that are going to be grainy, that are not as visible, we're finding that to a direct link of 30% no purchase. So people almost a third of the time are opting to not purchase those assets themselves. And I think that we understand that with assets that are being generated by users or by end folks that are not necessarily being photographed or taken in specific shoots, that's likely going to result in images that are different aspect ratios than what are needed, that are going to be different quality depending on the camera that was used or the time of day that it was taken. And so really, that's just further going to lower the trust of the actual item that we are promoting, whatever industry that might be in, and then therefore lowering the purchases that are going to happen in the end as well. And why are we seeing UGC being increased? We talked about the demand of assets increasing. And we can understand that there's a lot that goes into an actual photo shoot. Really getting pictures of our products is quite time intensive, cost intensive as well. And for each of these reasons that are listed here, there's always going to be an option to opt for getting media out in different channels like utilizing UGC. So just a quick call out here. Of course, if we have very consistent pictures like the watch we're seeing on the left, and we're sending these through to do something like fill the asset with additional information around all borders, the results are going to likely be more clear and consistent because the original asset is more clear and consistent that we're working with. And something I'll talk through a bit is just being aware and conscious of those inconsistencies that can come up and providing some different options and ways that we would recommend for you to utilize our Gen AI features, especially in terms of UGC context, where those assets might not be as consistent or clear each time that they're coming in, being analyzed, and then being output in production for you all. So there's two different ways that we can approach using generative AI features. And it's going to be programmatic automation. So essentially using our API, doing this in a programmatic fashion with hopefully some kind of moderation or person in place that's reviewing these results. Or we can do this in more of a kind of one-off UI type of fashion and having end users or creatives go in and test things. So I'll be walking through very high level in the programmatic piece and showing how this works and what we would recommend. And then I'll walk through as well and show a bit of the user interface as well. And so we can see that this image here is grainy, and then we're going to call something called generative restore. And so with Cloudinary, we have something that's called an on-the-fly transformation, and then we have something that's an eager transformation. On the fly is essentially saying, hey, when the image is loaded on a page, that's when we're making the application of the change or of the transformation to create the derivative. Versus what we really want to highlight and focus on is eager transformations upon upload. So in Cloudinary, this is saying I'm essentially pre-warming the cache for the asset. I'm going to create the derivatives and the versions of the asset that I want on upload. And so I'm using our API or whatever SDK of choice that you want to utilize there. And I'm saying, hey, when I'm uploading this asset, I want to create a version of it that's going to be padding the asset, cropping the asset, but then also restoring the asset itself. And this will allow you a few different things. First of all, for generative AI features, we probably don't want those happening on first load as someone comes to a web page and looks at the asset when we don't exactly know what the results are going to be. Most things with AI nowadays, we want to test and ensure before we get it out. So eagerly transforming the asset before it actually gets put on the page will allow it to come into Cloudinary with a version of it that we can then put in some kind of moderation queue. We can have folks come in and understand if it's what we're looking for as an end result and potentially create many different versions of this asset that we can then go select which one we like the most and move forward with that one. So just wanted to highlight the difference between those and really ensure that you are eagerly transforming assets upon upload so that we can get different variations of them. We can understand which one is the most applicable to move forward with, and we're not just having it load on the fly when an end user is coming in and seeing it for the first time. So we're going to talk through 3 different generative AI features today. The first one is going to be restore. And so with generative restore, really what we're doing is we're taking overworked, overutilized, or old assets that are going to be grainy, and we're going to enhance these to make them look more modern day. We're filling in the gaps, we're clearing up the pixels that are there, and we're making it be this nice, shiny, glowing kind of asset that we're looking for. And so this is also paired often with enhance. So generative restore and enhance go very well together. Restore is going to take the grainy image, make it into something much more crisp, and then enhance is really going to lighten that asset up, and it's going to make it brighter and more approachable for someone when they're viewing it on a web page. We have a very high-end jewelry brand that has used us for this specific use case and saved loads of time in regards to their manual editing processes. And so really this brand took a image that's on the left here with some different necklaces, and we can see that there's already a DPR of 2.0. So they were trying to enhance the image. DPR is device pixel ratio. And so they're essentially saying, hey, for every pixel that's there, we're going to add a 2x2. So really for every pixel, there's 4 different pixels that are there. They were trying to make an effort to enhance the image that's on the left already. We can see throughout the different phases of restoring it and enhancing it that really it's creating this vibrant look that someone wants to come in and say, hey, this is a high-end jewelry line. This is something that I want to be able to see the quality of what has been shot. And in this case here, we can really see the effects of that happening. As I had mentioned, transformations in Cloudinary are really going to be happening through adding different requests that we're calling out here. So really all that we're going to be doing in an API call is applying a request to say, hey, can you use generative AI to restore the asset itself? So as you would be doing that through API, we're going to essentially end up with an end result of a new URL that's going to store that specific transformation in it, create the derivative, and then we can see here in real time as well, we had the original asset that was uploaded. Once we work to restore that asset, we see that fine, crisp new version of it that's going to be applicable for folks. The next feature that we'll talk through is upscaling. And so upscaling is really common in especially like travel and hospitality, or any situation where someone's taking a picture of something that we want to make larger. And so our upscale feature is going to something people try to do all the time, right? You try to enlarge a picture, make something bigger for a presentation, put something on a banner that you need to change the size of, or essentially just get that grainy look that is, once again, not ideal for end production for the actual asset. And we've had a travel and hospitality company come in and utilize this for different assets that folks have taken out in the world for looking at different hotels and such that people are using. And I did want to highlight this one on our playground as well. So you can come in here and understand what's going on with the asset itself. So the results are quite remarkable for especially something that's going to be smaller image at the beginning. So we can see on the right here, what was our original size of the asset? And then essentially taking that asset and making it 4 times as large, what is the result going to look like in the end? We have a 600 pixels on the left side. We can see that's enlarged up to 2400. And then we get that grainy look there with not clear anything on the boat, the water, etc. But on the right, it is pretty remarkable that with one simple request, we can get this output. Definitely have seen a lot of consistency in this feature. Really think that it can be utilized in a lot of workflows for folks that are probably doing some manual work that could be doing it with one call through API with Cloudinary instead. And so you can play around and understand what the original and the new version of the assets are and look through some different industries that are utilizing this use case. And the final feature that I'm going to talk through today is going to be Cloudinary's generative fill capabilities, so that I can give some time to talk through the UI. Just going to talk through an example here that we've seen. So really, generative fill, we have a lot of different crop options at Cloudinary. This works with 4 of our different crop options, but imagine really we need to take some images of movie posters and turn them into banners, or we need to, in this case, take a pet supply advertisement and they wanted to make this into a tall walk-in banner once you enter the store. And so the first thing that we do with Cloudinary is we take that image and we say, okay, let's add some padding on the top and the bottom. So I'm essentially saying I want to make it into the size of the banner, but upon that first iteration of it, it's going to be filled with any color of background that I would want, but it's not going to be specific to the asset itself or anything that has been intelligently created there. And then we can see on the right, when we're actually using our generative fill capabilities, we're filling in the rest of the image, likely a concept you've seen in other places with generative fill features. And we're filling that in with information that we think would belong in the asset. We can see the tree elongated at the top, the grass at the bottom, and it looks pretty natural and definitely something that could be published and put onto a banner. And now the size won't impact the fidelity of that original asset or stretch it out or need to change the aspect ratio of that at all. We've just intelligently added what we think should be there as well. Do want to call out with generative fill, definitely is one of them that we will want to test and ensure that the results are what we're looking for. And so before I get into the interface and show you some capabilities that are there, a few lessons that we've learned and definitely pair well with using our API to automatically or to programmatically use our features here. Again, eagerly generate the assets. Warm up the cache first, have them ready in Cloudinary to load on the page once they load. But really the benefit of that is create derivatives of it. Try some different things with a single asset upon upload so that you can understand which of those is most relevant and use that as a test case and kind of point of statement for the rest of your assets that you're going to be working through as well. Of course, it's generative AI, so quality of the results is going to vary. It's something that is evolving over time. It has evolved a lot and continue to exponentially. However, for the time being, we definitely recommend some type of QA process. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about some recommendations here because we do have a lot of options for different moderation capabilities and different ways to work on a workflow that will review the process of those creative assets. And of course, provide feedback. Feel free to reach out to our support team or to your dedicated contact at Cloudinary if you have one. And always go ahead and offer information that will help us learn as well. This is how we're improving our results. If you're seeing wonky things regularly or you're getting unexpected results, that's how we are able to learn and advance our technology as well. So we really recommend a direct line of communication there. and want to hear from you in the end too. How do we democratize the solution and make it something that's applicable to others? Maybe if you're not technical and you are coming into Cloudinary and saying, hey, I want to test out the capabilities to promote these maybe to a technical team that can do it on a larger scale, or if you just want to play around with the features more yourself and don't want to utilize our API, you can come into Cloudinary and head into our transformations tab. And let's also, just to highlight here, as with our generative AI playground, you can get some kind of prompted recommendations for different features that you can test out using your own assets in Cloudinary or some of our stock photos. And first of all, again, highlighting, really nice to just play with any of our features that are listed on the left, including some of our generative AI capabilities. So you could go ahead and add assets in here and test any of the generative feature capabilities on the left. I just want to highlight as well that we do have a converse feature that is going to be an option. And so for an asset here, I'm just going to show that restore capability that we showed earlier. I have got a house that is going to be a bit grainy and outdated, was taken a while ago from a real estate company. And so the first thing I'm going to ask, can we please make this picture less blurry? It's nice because when we're chatting here, we can get a recommendation that's going to be a specific transformation that's highlighted here and as well added to the URL of the asset that you can click on and then manipulate further or utilize anywhere that you would like to. But it's nice because it's explaining what transformation was used. So we can see here, Cloudinary does have a lot of transformation options. Outside of generative AI features, we have things like Sharpen, which we had mentioned earlier. Sharpen here is essentially going to say, hey, from what I understood that you asked, I really want to sharpen the picture up. And as we can see, it did actually create a better derivative of the asset than what we had before. One note that I do want to call out, our generative AI features do have a different transformation count than a general transformation at Cloudinary. So a Sharpen capability that's using our baseline technology is going to be a transformation because it creates one derivative of the asset itself. If we're using our generative AI capabilities, it varies depending on what feature you're using. But likely that's a lot of why a generative AI feature wasn't recommended here explicitly. So do want to call out that if you do want to go ahead and use Gen AI, this is something that would be a bit of change management or encouraging your end users to understand that maybe that recommendation wouldn't come first. If you're using the construct that I had shown on the left, showing each of the options for the generative features, they're going to show up there. And so that's totally fine and applicable. However, as a default within this specific prompt, it might not always be the first thing to show up just out of that consideration itself. So let's see if we can simply just say using Gen AI and see if we get any kind of result back that's going to be using a new feature. So we can see here, it did understand, hey, I actually want to test out your whatever Gen AI feature is going to be most relevant here. And so in this case, we used, again, that generative restore, and we can see that the house is now not perfect, but a lot prettier than it was in the original version. I just wanted to explain that this can be done. I think if you can understand the features themselves and see that each of the transformations is changing the URL itself, you can apply that to understanding that we can utilize our API and do this in larger scale with a larger amount of assets. And it's definitely a great feature set to really test and play with and understand how and if it can be applicable to your use cases. It's something our team loves to brainstorm and talk to you about and say, hey, what are your goals? And let's see if any of our features here can align. And let's get some testing going and see what the results are looking like as well. For my end, that's really it.